Hey, it's Issa with Journey to Programming. I got an email last week from a Ben, and he's out in Cincinnati, Ohio. He asked me to review his resume. It seems like he's a college student looking to get a position as a software developer. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to review it for you guys here on YouTube. And hopefully Ben gets to check it out this week. I need to send him a response to make sure he knows that this video's out. But let's jump right in. All right, so this is Ben's resume. Again, I've removed a little bit of information from here so that we don't know exactly where Ben lives. He had his email address, his phone number, and a little more contact info than I would personally want to share with the world. So I removed that from his resume, and you still see some of his colleges and such. But let's go ahead and jump in here and review your resume, Ben. Hopefully this doesn't take too long, but let's jump in, okay? So first things first is a really simple resume. It's straightforward, really old-fashioned. Looks like you just kind of threw it together yourself. You didn't use any template on Word or on Google Docs, so that's fine, and I don't have a problem with that. One thing I'm going to go ahead and point out right away is the objective field. I already have it highlighted here. This is always a kind of questionable field for the software world to include. We don't always include an objective because you're going to be applying for a software developer position or a software engineering position. And the fact that you're applying for a software developer position or a software engineering or a game developer, etc., means that you're probably looking to do that role. This is a lot more applicable for those roles where you're working closely with a recruiter and you want them to know exactly what you're trying to do, or you want a company to give you a shot in a completely different field where they could maybe use you dynamically. But in the software world, especially as an entry-level person, you're going to be applying for the exact role that you're going to be doing. So I say you could probably keep some real estate by removing this. So I would go ahead and do that. You can kind of see me doing it here. The next thing, this entire education section is a little bit, what's the word? Hard to look at. It's a little confusing. I don't think things are laid out very well. I can read it fine. I can see that you go to Cincinnati State Technical and Community College. I see its location. You're getting an AA in business programming and sys analysis. Okay. You're expecting to graduate this year. Congrats. You have a 4.0 GPA. Wow. That's pretty awesome, man. Congratulations on that. And you've got some core coursework that you've done. I think you can really adjust the way this looks. I mean, take a look at this. I'm going to go ahead and simplify it a little bit here for you live. So what I would do is I'd probably bold my title here. I would probably bring down the font size a little bit in comparison to the title, but let's look at how it looks like in a minute anyways. Let's go ahead and just italicize your city names and state. I'm just going to go ahead and write Ohio on here. And then the actual degree you're going to be receiving, that is a long name. Associate in business programming. And so you could just simplify this to AAS, but you could leave it like this if you'd like. I would make this some sort of subtitle. I would also decrease its size in relation and maybe make it stand out by underlining it to kind of change the way it looks and make it stand out in comparison to the title as well as the state and city. So I think that's okay. The remainder of this can be simplified as well. Your expected graduation date and GPA should probably be separated out so you can really distinguish them from one another. I think with them next to each other like this, it's hard to see unless you were to add a table around them where there's a nice bar between them that we can separate them with. I would not put them on the same line. Okay, and you can also bring down this font size on these. Let's see. So if we bring down the font size to 10, that's approximately what we have here. I think 10 in general for a font size is a little bit small. So what we could do is we can actually bring all of these up to 12. Let's undo that. Just make sure that everything is 12, since that's kind of a standard readable. And what we can do is just give you a little separation between that header. If we zoom out, we can see how it looks. Expected graduation date. Let's take out a space here. And one last thing I would do is I would probably give this an underline as well, just to make it stand out. I think it's a little bit odd the way it's laid out. I would probably put your coursework above your graduation and then your GPA at the end. And is there a font difference between these? Let's see, you've got GPA, oh, maybe I set that to 10, there we go, 12. Yeah, I think this looks a bit more professional. I can read, okay, you want this school, and it must just be me, but I feel like Cincinnati looks really odd with that spelling. I don't know if I'm right or wrong. And everything else looks okay here. So C, I assume, is your primary language that you learned. That's why it's the first one. Then you go into some web languages. You did some MySQL, so okay, some database stuff. Oh, some VB, huh? Okay. And yeah, I think that whole section looks okay. The next thing I would probably do is I'd want to move education potentially below your work experience because you actually have relevant experience. And what I would do is I'd put it right below it. And that way, the first thing people will read is your work experience. Looking at your work experience, there's already a difference in the way you have this laid out. So you're formatting here, and you're formatting in that old education section. They were completely different. Let me show you really quickly just so you can see what we're talking about here. So this is how you had it at first, Ben. There's completely different formatting. For some reason, you use a list format here with bullet points, but you don't do that for your coursework here, which this could definitely be put into a list format. You also have your title here bold, but you don't do it here. So getting some consistency, I think, would be important. So I'm going to go ahead and move forward to where I just had us. And I'm going to show you what I would do to adjust this. Now, first of all, let's read through your experience. So you were a software development intern at XYZ company. I removed that so that people don't know where you actually worked. That's just my recommendation. I think that you can probably adjust the company name to be bold, and then you can move your title underneath it so it kind of becomes an encompassed title setup. And your title is associated with the parent here, if you want to think about it like that. I would also follow the same design we did for your schooling there, and then I would move your work dates one line below it, and I don't like that it seemed like there's double spacing occurring between them. I don't think that's necessary. So let me take a look if there is. I think between the title of the section, that's fine. But then these really don't need to have a double space going on between them. So I'm going to remove, and the way I did that, I went to a remove space after paragraph section here, and that allowed me to remove that. So after doing that, I think that maybe you can live with placing your term that you worked for them on the same line as a company. I think that maybe making this entire sequence italicized would be good. And that's okay. So now, what did you actually do? You were a software development intern. That's good. You developed a back end using PHP and a front end using JavaScript, CSS, and HTML. Created complex queries, wrote APIs, structured applications in an MVC architecture pattern. Okay, so it sounds like you were doing some full stack work for this company. You were writing some APIs. I assume they were connecting to the databases for this or trying to access information from either another application for some other purposes. That's great. And that's really good experience to get, especially as an intern. That's awesome. But one thing that I have a problem with in your description here is you don't give me a lot of information regarding what you actually did. I don't know if you did everything end to end. So you wrote all of the back end and you also wrote the entire front end. Or did you write a sub portion of the back end just to write APIs in PHP, which queried the actual databases for you? What databases did you use? So in here, you mentioned that you're using PHP and MySQL, so I assume you're using a LAMP stack. Did you use a LAMP stack? And for JavaScript, you used Vanilla.js. You didn't use any frameworks. So that's a lot of really good information that would be good to know. Obviously, if you were using vanilla JavaScript, CSS, and HTML, I assume you're just using JavaScript, Vanilla.js. That's what I would understand from this. It doesn't seem like you're using something else, although the second you say MVC, I want to think that you're using a framework. So you could be using a framework along this entire sequence. So maybe you're using Cake PHP, Laravel, or maybe you went and used Angular for some of your front end. I don't know. So if you can clarify that, maybe that'd be good. Even turning this into something like a bullet point list with a story in front of it might be useful. So if you wanted to, you could do something like I developed or let's say worked on developing a front and back end web application, or let's just say developing the front end and back end of the business website or some application of ABC application, right? The front end was implemented using Angular.js, and allowed users and third parties to, to access information from a MySQL database for period. That's where I ended off. Created a set of PHP APIs and custom functions to allow for secure login. Secure login and sessions, etc. So this may be completely out in left field in comparison to what you actually did, but it explains everything that you potentially could have done if this were what you actually implemented, and this is how you did it. Instead of putting bullet points where it's very generic, I let people know, okay, I use PHP to write APIs, and I also created a few custom functions. You basically created a session and you stored people's authentication in that session information on the server. And that would be really helpful for a future employer to know, because then it shows that you have a little bit of back-end experience writing some server code and doing some user authentication. You also have written some APIs, which then drive data into a front end like Angular or even your custom front end if you did it all from scratch. Okay, so now moving on, you could keep these bullet points here, or you could, again, just turn it onto one nice little narrative. You could also turn the narrative into bullet points and make these a little bit more descriptive. Either way, your choice, and then go from there and see how it works. So next thing, you did computer tutoring. Again, I don't like this formatting. I would turn it into this format here, and then let's take a look. So you did this from May to July 2018, so last year. It looks like you did during your summer. Good for you. You identified gaps in understanding of students working on MS SQL, VBNet, and PHP, and provided guidance to solve their design and implementation issues. Okay. So I think this is fine. I can guess what you were doing. I'm assuming you had other students that are trying to implement projects using these languages. It was likely in your database design and my MS SQL Server course, and you probably were a TA for that class or something like that. That's great. Not a problem at all. You could identify a little more information regarding the types of issues you help them solve. Maybe you can say how you help them solve it. Did you help them debug it? Did you advise them? So you worked through them socially. You talked them through the problems kind of in like a Socratic method. That'd be good to know. And then and explain complex concepts. It'd be nice to know what kind of complex concepts you were talking about. So were you tutoring and explaining concepts in a particular course? Was it all database design and MS SQL? It'd be good to know. So if you were to tell me that you're advising people on complex C topics, then I would think, okay, you're in like a hardware operating systems level class, and that's good experience to have if you're going to go work on a platform that has to interact with hardware, right? And if it's a web-based coursework, then that would help for web-based companies. So having that detail in there would be great. Lastly, your relevant skills. Let's see. I think that this generally looks fine. I don't think you need the bullet points in here if you just center these and you actually had them aligned underneath these header sections. So I'm not sure why they're not aligned, but if you can get these to align perfectly, I think that would be a sufficient way to kind of label here. Do you have extra spaces in here? Is that what's going on? That may be what's going on. Okay. So let's take a look. Everything looks like it's spaced out a little bit. So let's go ahead and center. There we go. So I think doing something like this looks fine. Front end, you have JS, CSS, with HTML, the standard stuff, okay? If you have any framework experience for JavaScript, you really should note it. So if you're doing some Bootstrap stuff and you're a beginner, it may be helpful to say that you've had experience with Bootstrap somewhere, either in your descriptions or here in your relevant skills. Angular, similar. You should note it. Back end. So I don't know if I would necessarily call C a back end language. I mean, that's a low-level programming language there. And don't get me wrong, I'm sure if you really want to, you could, but I don't know if this would necessarily go under back end. I think perhaps if you wanted to call it kind of hardware, desktop, or just programming languages, then that would work. Database, okay, you've used MS SQL, and then you've also used MySQL, that's fine. I guess my only questionable kind of description here is going to be this backend definition, and it's just because C for backend, maybe. I think maybe C# would probably be more likely, but I'm not 100% sure if you mean C or C#. I'm actually surprised seeing the rest of your experience that you guys have done C in general. Maybe you meant to say C#. If that's the case, that's a huge difference. Make sure you change that. Otherwise, it all looks okay. I think maybe you could move relevant experience up. You could, because it's a small section, have it above your work experience. And then that could kind of be your new layout or look. I still think that the resume is a little bit hard to read, but it's at least better this way. You also don't need to put your address. Your phone number is good to have on here. Make sure you have your email address. And otherwise, I think it looks pretty good. I think all around, you did an okay job. You definitely need to explain things a little bit better and work on your formatting. Take a look at the the templates that are available in Windows, in Microsoft Word. They do have some resume templates available. They may help. And then also look at Google Docs. If you just go to docs.google.com, then you should be able to find some good templates that you can reuse and just copy and paste your info into and just make sure it lays out correctly. And if you want, send it back over. We can take another look. Anyways, this is Issa with Journey of Programming. Thanks, Ben, for sending over your resume. We hope this helps. If you haven't subscribed, subscribe down below over there and like us and share. Have a good one, guys.